Here you can see some turned chair legs. Obviously I've taken the chair apart at this stage, and what I need to do is try and remove this stain from the chair legs. Now there's a few ways that you can do this. The easiest way to do it, and the way I've done on the other chair leg so far, is to put it in the lathe and sand it. It's easy process, it's simple, it's how it would have been done originally, and there is really no better way of sanding the leg as far as I can see. However, often the chair isn't dismantled and you still want to sand the chair leg. So what do you do in that situation? Well, that's what I'm going to show today. I'm going to show the construction of a bow sander, because I think, for my mind, that's the best way of sanding these round shaped surfaces, other than by hand. So as you can see, coming off the lathe, the sanding has worked pretty well. It's got rid of most of the stain, although there is some still left in the end grain sections of the turning. But what I'm going to do now is show you the construction of a bow sander and how it will be used on turned legs like these. Here I'm using some reclaimed wood. This is part of a furniture. Judging by the weight and the colour of the material, I'm assuming it's something like poplar. Obviously you can use any wood you like to build this, but when I'm building tools for the workshop, often, unless I want a really nice bespoke handmade tool, if I'm just looking for something to do a quick job, I'll use reclaimed material or offcuts to try and build a project, and then I'm not too worried if it doesn't survive or last very long, because often the first design is just a prototype and I'll find improvements, and it might be 2 or 3 iterations before I settle on a design I'm really happy with. And obviously if you have lots of wood lying around and large wide pieces of scrap, you can just use a solid piece of wood here. In my case, I'm using these small offcuts and gluing them together to produce a sander. You may think that's going to produce something that's fairly weak, but the glue's going to be more than strong enough for the pressure that's going to be put on this. It's going to be sandpaper at the end of the day, and it's not under huge amounts of tension. Now, you could consider this finished. You could attach some sandpaper to this and it would function perfectly well. But I'm going to make it slightly more shaped and slightly more comfortable to hold, so that's going to be the next step we see here. So here I'm cutting up some sandpaper. These are old scissors and these are not good quality scissors. So obviously just use something you're not too worried about damaging if you're cutting sandpaper. These strips you can make in any grit size you like, and it would be a good idea to have multiple different lengths in different grits so that you can replace one piece with another. The alternative is to have multiple bow sanders with different grits on, which is a good idea depending how much of this you're likely to do. Now, my first thought when I was putting this together was just to staple the sandpaper onto the tool. But what I've decided to do now is take some of the offcuts that came off this as I was cutting it on the bandsaw and use them as essentially little clamps. I'm going to put a hole through them and put a screw through, and that'll allow me to take on and off the sandpaper without having to pry out staples. This is an extremely quick tool to build. This probably only took me about 15 minutes, and it comes in quite useful. So here I'm going to demonstrate how I use the tool on the rounded parts. This is obviously the leg I sanded earlier, and this grit is probably too rough for what I'm doing at this stage. But because there's flex in the sandpaper, it allows it to form around the curves and give you a good surface. The step I'm taking here is to put a crease into the sandpaper. What that will help me do is form around some of the more finer parts of the turning, and hopefully allow me to get into some of the curves on the turning. So my advice is, if you've dismantled the leg, to put it in the lathe. It's a much better process. You will get a much better result. This tool will work, but the difficulty with this tool is you are much more likely to lose some of the refinement of the turning. It's going to sand the turning well, but it's going to remove some of the sharpness from the turning. Okay, I hope this project is useful for you, and you find a use for the bow sander. It is quite a useful tool and a very easy one to make. If you've enjoyed this project, why don't you consider watching one of my others that should be shown on the screen now.